that song? Pat James and the Whole Truth. Hey now. You can find that song wherever you get music. I'm Scott Fox, and I want to welcome you to the pod. Today, I'm going to try and give you a really easy to follow, full of audio episode of this podcast that you can learn about the budget. You can hear some of the reaction to the budget, and some of it, I think, is going to surprise you. I'm also going to play that floor crosser, the guy who was a conservative and said everything is horrible under Mark Carney, has now decided everything is great under Mark Carney, and he wants to work for Mark Carney. You're going to hear from that floor crosser, and then you're going to hear some reaction to that. And I'm also, in this episode, I got to fit this in, new audio from Ontario Premier Doug Ford, who is explaining why he ripped up that multi-million-dollar contract with Starlink to provide internet service for those in remote areas of Ontario. We don't know how much money it costs to get out of that contract, but you're going to hear from the Premier. He's also going to talk about the LCBO. So lots to do in this episode, and I think you're going to learn a lot and probably even enjoy it. So kick back, relax, and let's do this. I'm going to start off with Prime Minister Mark Carney. Yesterday, he began the day with a news conference in the Ottawa area to try and sell his budget to Canadians. How do you think that's going over so far? I'm hearing a lot of people that do not like how big that deficit is. Almost $80 billion. And I think people are starting to connect the dots now as well on the interest. It's official. We now pay more in interest on Canada's debt than we do on health care. Here is Prime Minister Mark Carney.
I want to thank my colleagues from the National Capital Region for joining me. And I would especially like to thank Chris D'Entremont, the Member for Parliament for Acadie, Annapolis. I'm honored to welcome him as the newest member of our government caucus, the government caucus, at this crucial moment for our country is exceptionally valuable and important. History of nations, they're punctuated by hinge moments, times when the future hangs in the balance and when our actions must be decisive. Canada is facing one of these moments right now. Technological change is accelerating, the world is more divided and dangerous, and the global trading system is literally being rewired, threatening jobs and businesses under a cloud of uncertainty. These profound changes demand a bold response, and that's what we got yesterday. Canada's new government tabled our first budget. We presented a clear picture of what's happening to our economy and what's being taken from us. It's estimated, you'll find in the budget, it's estimated that U.S. tariffs and the uncertainty that they're creating will cost us around 1.8% of our GDP. Let me translate that. That's about $50 billion lost from our economy, or the equivalent of $1,300 for every Canadian. Now, while we can't control what the U.S. does, we can decide what happens here. This is Canada, and we can build the future we want for ourselves. We can get that money back and more.
Well, the Prime Minister goes into French there. Are you buying it? You know, he's still trying to drag out this existential crisis thing. Do you feel that way? Because I don't get that vibe anymore, guys. You know, maybe back in the spring when people were worried that Donald Trump was coming to annex our country, maybe then I could see it. But for the Prime Minister to keep going on about this being some sort of an imminent emergency, I personally don't understand it, and I don't feel it. I don't think the vast majority of Canadians have really felt the impact of tariffs. Frankly, I think that's what makes the Prime Minister seem kind of out of touch on this one. But let's hear him out. Let's hear what else he has to say about this budget before I play some reaction.
Budget 2025 is a bold strategy to unleash over $1 trillion in total investment in Canada over the next 5 years. That alone can increase our GDP by over 3.5%. Again, let me translate. That's equivalent to more than $3,500 for every Canadian, delivering far more for Canadians than what's being taken from us from abroad.
Again, do you feel like things are being taken from us? Because I really don't get that vibe. However, since the Prime Minister brought up GDP, I think this is an interesting part where we can break from the Prime Minister and hear a little bit of testimony from a House of Commons committee that was studying finance just yesterday. And the Bank of Canada governor, that son of a bitch, Tiff Macklem, was being questioned by a Conservative member of Parliament. Let's hear what the governor of the Bank of Canada has to say about GDP.
Mr. Macklem, in your most recent monetary policy report, I'm going to quote a section there. It says, weak growth is likely in the second half of 2025. After contracting in the second quarter, GDP growth is estimated to be about 0.75% on average for the second half of the year. So when we look at it on a year-to-date basis, is it fair to say that performance is basically neutral for our economy? But of course, the Prime Minister is promising Canadians that he's going to be building the economy at unimaginable speeds not seen since the Second World War. So I did a bit of research, and it looks like Canada's GDP growth following the years of the Second World War were between 6 and 7%. So based on your forecasts, when do you expect that we would achieve that 67% GDP growth?
Our forecast goes out about 2 to 3 years, and we don't achieve that. We've got, I think, 1.2, 1.1, and 1.6 in 2027.
And what do you think the economy would need to achieve that 6 and 7% GDP growth?
If we want much higher growth in the economy, we're going to need much higher productivity growth.
Okay. So when I read the news, I see that auto manufacturers have relocated investment to the U.S., some big names recently. Housing starts in Toronto specifically are at 30-year low. Bottling companies are also moving operations to the U.S. And of course, small businesses have been heavily impacted because of the U.S. tariffs. Given that, do you believe that our economy is growing at unimaginable speeds, like the Prime Minister has mentioned?
At a what speed?
Unimaginable.
Unimaginable. Well, I'm not really going to put it on. I mean, you can decide on the adjective. I mean, our forecast is 1.1, 1.2, 1.6.
So, in simple terms, for Canadians watching, that means that our economy is not growing very fast.
No.
Is that fair to say?
No, our economy is not growing very fast.
Thank you, Chair. Governor, Deputy Governor, thank you for being here. Governor, the bank recently updated its outlook for GDP. It's below 2% now for economic growth. As we've seen, the Prime Minister promised to have the fastest growing economy in the G7. But given this new adjustment that the bank made, do you think the other G7 countries will outpace Canada in economic growth?
Well, certainly I would agree. Our forecast is for very modest growth. Second half of this year, averaging only 0.75%. We do expect it to pick up, but as I indicated in my remarks, this is a structural adjustment, and so that's going to take some time. So yes, I don't have all the G7 forecasts in front of me, but we're not going to be the fastest growing economy in the G7.
Okay, well, that is a problem, and in stark contrast from what another central banker, Mark Carney, is telling the Canadian people. Let's hear more from the Prime Minister.
Now is not the time to be cautious because fortune favors the bold. It is a time to get big things done for Canadians and get them done fast. So we're building one Canadian economy, turbocharged by new infrastructure that connects our regions, that diversifies our trading markets, infrastructure that makes us an energy superpower in clean and conventional energy, new infrastructure that restores affordability to housing and secures our borders and our communities while creating literally hundreds of thousands of high-paying careers from the skilled trades to advanced technology. And the budget will make these generational investments while maintaining Canada's strong fiscal advantage by taking responsible, pragmatic choices. We're changing how government works, spending less on government operations so Canadians can invest more in our future. We're making government much more productive by right-sizing, cutting red tape and wasteful spending, and adopting AI at scale. All of this so that Canadians can count on their government to be more efficient in delivering the services that matter to you.
Okay, well, he's going to go into French here, so I feel like this is another good opportunity to intervene with a little bit of feedback on the budget. You just heard the Prime Minister painting a very conflicting picture. The government is going to spend less so Canadians can invest more. Canadians can count on their government because their government's got this. This again from the Liberals who have been in power for the last 10 years and, well, look around. Look around. Things aren't very good. I mean, I don't think anybody thinks things are good right now. Our dollar is now below 71 cents. Not very good. But let's get some of that reaction that I promised you. How about a well-known commentator from television? Andrew Coyne is a writer for the Globe and Mail, and he appears regularly on the CBC's signature political panel At Issue. Andrew Coyne has done a lot of snow plowing for the Liberals over the last 10 years. He helps to smooth things over when the government puts out things that are unpopular. Well, what does that apologist of the Liberal government have to say about this budget? Here's Andrew Coyne in a TikTok for the Globe and Mail.
When you actually look at what's in the budget of 2025, it's not a whole lot. It's mostly in the right direction, but it's transformative. It is not. So, for example, if you thought the government was going to tackle the budget deficit in any serious way, the budget deficit's going up. It's going to be running about twice as large as the budgets under Justin Trudeau. The debt to GDP ratio, which used to be the anchor, keep it from rising, it's going to rise. So now they're saying, well, we're just going to keep the deficit falling. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. Spending is going to be significantly higher than under the Trudeau government. So if you thought there was a shift to the right in this government, maybe think again. And then particularly when you get into what's it going to do to generate higher economic growth. I think everybody realizes, even before the Donald Trump crisis came upon us, that we had to get our economy growing faster, that it was really quite sluggish. There's something called a productivity super deduction. Now, every time you see the word super, you should maybe pause and consider whether it might not be quite that super. And when you look at it, in fact, it's a package of previously announced measures to accelerate expenses for certain industries in certain situations, plus a couple of new ones. It really doesn't add up to very much. And the notion that this is on its own, or even in combination with other measures, is going to lead to anything in the way of seriously higher economic growth, higher productivity, make us the kind of attractive place to invest that can withstand these enormous tariffs that Donald Trump's putting on us, it's just not going to move the needle that much. So it's a surprisingly cautious budget all in all. I have to think that because they're in a minority government situation, they didn't dare really put a lot into it in terms of either spending cuts or radical tax changes, et cetera. So if anybody was speculating over whether this was going to bring the government down, think again. I mean, the notion of going to the people over this just seems ridiculous.
Oh, that is problematic for the federal government then. I think normally they would count on someone like Andrew Coyne to go out and explain the budget to Canadians in terms that they can understand so that they know that they can trust their government. A problem indeed for the Prime Minister. Let's get back to him explaining why we need this budget.
This budget protects the essential programs that give every Canadian a fair chance to get ahead, including childcare, dental care, pharmacare, as well as federal health care, education, and social transfers to the provinces.
Let me just pause the Prime Minister there. I find it ironic that he says something like, this budget allows all Canadians to get ahead because of programs like, and then he lists off a whole bunch of programs that don't apply to all Canadians. The daycare. That's one that parents who have got kids in daycare certainly appreciate. Absolutely. Although no confirmation that that's going to be extended, not in Ontario anyway, and a handful of other provinces. Dental care. That's not for every Canadian. I can't access that. I'm sure a lot of people listening can't. You can don't say it helps all Canadians and then only give examples of programs that don't help all Canadians. The pharmacare program, that was another one he mentioned. How many Canadians are benefiting from that? It's a tangible number, but it's not even close to all Canadians. That's a misleading thing from the Prime Minister to be saying.
Friends, the work ahead won't always be easy because the challenges we face are not small. But in this moment of great change and deep uncertainty, we have a choice. We can retreat, slash the deficit, hope for the best, wait and see if the trickle-down ever comes. That will gut the support to the most vulnerable Canadians just when they need that support the most. And it won't grow our economy.
Okay, that's our central banker and self-proclaimed economist saying that what Pierre Poilievre wants to do wouldn't work. He thinks that pumping billions and billions and billions of dollars into government programs is the only way for the middle class to get ahead. I personally disagree with that, and I'm coming to you today as a conservative and as a member of the middle class. I'll tell you what Pierre wants to do is reduce government spending. Make sure that we're not printing money, which leads to more inflation, which leads to higher interest rates, and so on and so forth. Pierre wants to cut the industrial carbon tax to help bring down prices at the grocery store and at the gas pumps. There's a lot of things in the Conservative plan that would actually help the middle class right now. The Prime Minister doesn't like that. He doesn't like the idea of Canadians controlling their own destiny. He doesn't think that Canadians hanging on to more of their money and spending it as they see fit, he doesn't think that'll work for the economy. He doesn't understand that if Canadians had more money, more disposable income, they would spend it, and that would be a massive injection into the economy. People with money is one of the best support plans that you could put out there. The government really wants people dependent on government. That's an essential point. They want people dependent on government. I heard from a whistleblower. Maybe I should tell you guys this now. I heard from a whistleblower at the Canada Revenue Agency. You likely heard, as part of this budget, and it was talked about before the budget as well, in fairness, the Liberals have floated the idea of automatic tax filing. If you don't file a return, the government will file one for you. Well, that's got some issues, but by and large, the intention of that program is to help out the lowest income, highest need Canadians. There's a lot of folks who just don't have any money. They're homeless, or they're broke, or they're living in a shelter, or what have you. And they don't see a whole lot of need to file a tax return. They didn't make any money, so they don't owe any money. But the thing is, unless you file a tax return, you're not eligible to get the benefits that the government offers. Things like HST rebates and stuff like that. Well, the government's plan is to automatically file a return for you, and that'll make you eligible to get government benefits. I'm told that this is also the next step in introducing UBI, the Universal Basic Income. In other words, if they determine that you need at least $16,000 a year to get by, the government will just give you $16,000 over the course of 12 months. If you make more than $16,000, you don't get it. And there's a lot of debate around this because a lot of people feels it incentivizes not working. It actually rewards not working. It punishes hard work. Universal basic income is something we're going to need to talk about. It's something the left really believes in. And I'm not going to shut the idea down now, but I will tell you that now everything the CRA needs to roll out universal basic income is in place once this budget passes. Once the automatic tax filing is in place, the CRA is ready to roll out universal basic income. We'll be talking more about that. Just want to let you know that I'm told the software is ready, the algorithms are studied, everything is ready to go. Canada is going with UBI. Now let's get to some of the Q&A with the Prime Minister.
Hi, Prime Minister. Jillian Piper with Global News.
Hi.
How many Conservatives has your caucus approached about joining the Liberal Party?
Well, I'd say the following. First, I want to underscore what I said at the start, how much I admire Chris D'Entremont, appreciate his joining the government caucus at this crucial time for our country. And I think that's the point to all MPs, wherever they're sitting in the House. This is a time where we need to act as a country be as unified as possible, to act boldly, and to invest in the future of Canada. That's what this budget does, and we'll speak to anyone, publicly or otherwise, that can support us.
Interesting comment. He'll speak to them publicly or otherwise. The Canadian press has now reported, and it's official, that the Liberals have been trying to recruit Chris D'Entremont, that former Conservative MP from Nova Scotia that crossed the floor the other day. They've been trying to recruit him for 5 years. For 5 years, they've been trying to convince him to come over to the Liberals. And you know there's others. They're trying to do it. You see, in the last federal election, the Liberals were given a minority government, a minority mandate from the Canadian people. And that's totally fine. Minority governments, we all understand how they work. They need to work with the opposition parties in order to get legislation passed. And if the opposition doesn't like that legislation, they should have to go back and revise it until it becomes palatable for everyone involved. The Canadian people did not give the Liberals a majority government. If they're trying to buy off opposition MPs to join them on their side so that they do get a majority government, that's dishonest, and that is not democracy. That is not what Canadians voted for. Canadians did not vote to give the Carney Liberals a majority mandate. They're supposed to work with the opposition parties, and if they can convince enough people to cross the floor, they'll have a majority, and again, that's not what Canadians voted for. Yesterday, Wellington Halton Hills Member of Parliament Michael Chong, real smart guy, was talking on his way out of Parliament. Here's what he had to say about the floor crossing.
Well, last spring, Canadians elected a minority parliament and put a check and balance on the power of an untested prime minister. Mr. Carney is trying to manipulate that result and get a majority Canadians did not elect.
Okay, so he's saying basically the same thing I'm saying about that. That's not the mandate that the Canadian people gave to this Liberal government. They wanted a minority situation. That's what the will of the people was in the last election. And the Carney Liberals are trying to get around that by buying off weak-minded and unprincipled members of the opposition. Here is more from Prime Minister Carney before I get to that floor crosser. He's coming up in just a few.
Good morning.
Morning, Greg.
The Liberals writ large have run deficits for a decade now. This is also one of the largest deficits outside of COVID. Is there a philosophy behind this? Are you into modern monetary theory?
Oh,
Are you a Keynesian?
Come on, Greg. You know better than to
how
throw
can
these
Canadians
insults.
be presented with continuing budget deficits with no plan to balance?
That's pas tout. Okay. All right. First, we have the best balance sheet in the G7. We have one of the best in the OECD, so the 30 countries of the OECD. We have the second lowest deficit in the G7. We have one of the lowest deficits in the OECD. That continues to be the case over the forecast period. That's the first point. The second is the philosophy, the approach. As I think you know, or you would know from reading the first page of the budget, is that we are getting spending under control, slowing spending from 8% growth, which had been the case for the last decade, to less than 1%, so less than the rate of growth of the economy, by eliminating duplication, eliminating waste, cutting red tape, making the public service more productive, giving them new tools and making it more productive so that Canadians get not just the same service but better service with less. So we're doing that over the course. That's new. And any deficit financing is for the investment that is going to grow this economy.
Do you believe any of that? Come on. Okay, claiming that we've got this raging great economy is dishonest. We all know it's not. A few minutes ago, I played the Governor of the Bank of Canada with a very bleak forecast. I've been playing a lot of audio over the last couple of weeks about how bad things are. For the Prime Minister to suggest otherwise is not right. I'll credit Mario for the North, great guy from my area as well. He put out a TikTok, and it's all over all the platforms that he's on. A great video explaining how the Liberals are coming to this conclusion that we've got some of the lowest debt to GDP ratios and we've got a great economy here. It's because they're factoring in the pension plans, the CPP and the Quebec pension plan. Well, those aren't assets just because we've got the money. They're liabilities because we need to pay that money out. Do you understand what I mean? Check out Mario for the North. Throw him a follow if you want to know more about that. It's an accounting trick. And I mean, I don't know that a government that has to throw out accounting tricks is really a government that we should be trusting. There's a reason they're putting in those tricks, and it's not a good reason. It's dishonest that they're doing that. You know who we need to hear from here? Because I'm trying to give you some of the opposition as well. Let me play for you a bit of a news conference that happened yesterday with the union that represents our federal civil service, the Public Service Alliance of Canada, PSAC. Here's them yesterday commenting on the budget.
The budget really reads like austerity, and Canada's unions refuse to let workers pay the price. The government wants to cut tens of thousands of public service jobs. This will mean longer EI waits, slower passports, fewer safety inspections, food inspections, delays for seniors and families, and my colleagues will talk more about that. You do not modernize services by gutting them. And I cannot believe that I heard this morning from the Prime Minister that same old about doing more with less. It didn't work 30 years ago, it didn't work 20 years ago, and it's not going to work today. So workers and families need support, not service cuts and layoffs. To balance the books, start with closing tax loopholes and corporate tax giveaways. The capital gains did not have to be adjusted. That's going to really help the top 10% of earners. The middle class tax cuts, the top 10% of Canadian earners will get more as an average tax cut than the 80% of earners in this country. That's tax cuts for the upper class. The labor movement will fight any attack on public services and workers' rights, and that's why we're here. We need investment in people. We need investment in good jobs, in good, strong, quality public services.
Okay, I think that's all we need to hear for now. But if you want to watch that news conference, you can go and watch it. So you've now heard from Liberal apologist Andrew Coyne. You've heard from the Public Service Alliance of Canada. And you've heard from the Governor of the Bank of Canada. And all three of them are not happy and painting a pretty bleak picture. But that's weird because the Prime Minister said all those nice words and it was all very eloquently put. And he said everything is great. Who do you think is lying to you? Who do you think is lying to you? I'm just going to leave it at that. Before I get off this topic and go to the floor crosser, Chris D'Entremont. I love saying that name, even though I said it yesterday. I've been looking into this guy. He really is a loser. And I don't like to call people I don't know names, but this guy really is. I don't understand how you can have a conservative political ideology in April and then all of a sudden on a dime pivot to a completely new political ideology in November. I mean, back in April, he said Carney was the worst. He said what the Liberals are doing is ripping Canada apart. He said the spending and the lack of attention on things like crime and immigration and the high cost of food and the taxes. He hated all of it. And then he signed up to be a spokesperson for it in November. This is political opportunism at its finest. Over the years, I'm told 300 plus members of parliament have crossed the floor. This one's making a lot of headlines because when a conservative goes to the Liberals, the liberal mainstream media loves that. Woo, this is red meat on the bone for the media. They're all over this thing. They're wondering, is anybody going to be next? Who else is going to go? I mean, it's happened many, many times in the past, and they didn't pay that much attention to it. But the media's job right now, this is the mainstream media, not digital media like you're listening to. You've made a good choice. I worry about the people that only get their news from the mainstream media because they're not getting the whole truth. They're just not. They're cheering this on like it's some sort of a Sunday afternoon football game. They're loving this. And they're not telling you the whole story. But again, I'll come back to that floor crosser in just a sec. Let's put a bow on the budget discussion. Let's hear from opposition leader Pierre Poilievre and the Prime Minister back to back during yesterday's question period.
Never before have Canadians had to spend so much to get so little. This budget, with its record deficit outside of COVID, is a deficit twice as the size of the one Trudeau left behind, and $16 billion bigger than the Prime Minister promised. It has, in this spending, $5,400 of extra costs for every family in more expensive government. While Canadians are already unable to eat, heat, and house themselves, why is this Prime Minister's costly budget making them pay even more?
Hear, hear. Hear, hear. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, this budget has 75% of the measures are for our sovereignty, to protect our borders, to protect our communities, to protect our way of life. And the balance is for affordability, a middle-class tax cut that the member opposite missed because he was not here. Mr. Speaker, this budget invests in Canada at twice the rate as any budget during this millennium. We believe in Canada.
75% of all of this new spending is to defend our sovereignty. And let me go back to a point that I made earlier. I don't think our sovereignty is at threat here. The only thing at threat is the country itself from falling apart or going completely bankrupt. Donald Trump is not coming to annex Canada. Spending that much money, all those tens of billions of dollars, putting us up to a $1.7 trillion debt, putting us at a point where it's official, we're now spending more on the interest on our debt than we do on health care. Do you know what an extra $60 billion a year could do to improve health care? But we don't have it. The interest on our debt now is more than the government brings in GST in a year. It's true. Fact check me. We bring in less in GST than we spend on the interest on our debt. That's part of the reason that what I talked about yesterday is likely going to happen. Taxes are going to have to go up, and it's probably going to have to be the HST that goes up. Now let's get to that floor-crossing conservative that went to the Liberals, Chris D'Entremont.
Good morning.
Hi. Making sure, yeah. Mr. D'Entremont, Mike Liquiteur with CTV News. I wanted to ask you, what was the deciding factor in crossing the floor? And if you could also indulge, how many other conservatives in your caucus feel the same way that you do?
Well, let's start with the story of how I got here. I would think over the last number of months, I wasn't feeling that I was aligned with the ideals of what the leader of the opposition had been talking about. So I've been sort of relooking at, what my career is bringing and what I can do for my constituency. So over the last little bit, talking to many of my friends in the Liberal Party, as Deputy Speaker, I got to know a lot of those members personally, ask questions, see what's going on, and understanding the point that we are in Canadian history, where it's time to actually try to lead a country, to try to make it better. And not try to knock it down, not to continue to be negative. In my case, as a Nova Scotian, we're always trying to find ways to work together to solve issues that are important to our communities. And I didn't see it by sitting in the opposition. I saw it by being a part of the government caucus.
But is that the right thing for your people, Chris? It's funny that Mike Liquiteur decided to ask that question. I saw his hit piece last night on this on CTV, and it was gross. He's one who's really cheering on this floor crossing. He loves it, treating it like a Sunday afternoon football game. Listen, Chris here is basically suggesting that he did this for his constituents. He could get more done for them in government. What is it that your people have that the rest of the country doesn't have? Let me speak specifically to the tens of thousands of listeners that I've got in Nova Scotia. Last night on CTV, in the piece that Mike did, they interviewed a whole bunch of Nova Scotians. And I think if they interviewed 8 people, 6 of them were generally supportive of this move. 2 of them were not. That is not reality. They're skewing your perspective and how you feel about this to make it seem like everyone in Nova Scotia really supports this. Only a handful of people didn't like it. That's not true. Then that's not balanced coverage. But it is par for the course with the mainstream media because that's how they gaslight you and how they manipulate you. They show you a couple people with a specific way of thinking, and it leads you to believe that everybody feels that way, when in reality, that is just not true. Does the people of Nova Scotia, this guy here's riding, are they wealthy? Are they rich? Do they not care about how much things are costing at the grocery store? Were they immune from inflation? Were they immune from high interest rates? Is there no crime in Nova Scotia? Is there no immigration problem in Nova Scotia? Is there an abundance of jobs in Nova Scotia that I'm not aware of? Because it would seem to me if you really wanted to represent your constituents, you would be challenging the government to do better, to change course. Or you'd be trying to get the opposition, who has a plan to address all of those things, elected so that your constituents could do better. But not Chris here. Chris is an opportunistic fella. Chris here is looking for something for Chris. He's mad that he didn't get support from his party to become the deputy speaker again. He's mad that he doesn't get a lot of attention. He's blaming other people. Ooh, characteristic narcissist there. Chris here thinks the grass is greener with the Liberals. He thinks the Liberals are better for Nova Scotia. And to be honest with you, I know there's people in Nova Scotia that believe that. But the people who voted for Chris do not. The people who put Chris in Ottawa do not. They elected him as a conservative because he said he had conservative values. And once he got their vote, he stuck his middle finger up at them and said, screw you, I'm going to take a pay increase. What did they offer him? What was the deal? The Canadian press is reporting it, so I'll trust that as confirmed. The Canadian press says the Liberals have been trying to convince this guy to cross the floor for 5 years. Maybe we should be congratulating him for holding out that long. It's very dishonest what he did back in the spring, or it's dishonest what he's doing now. Nobody completely swaps their ideology in a matter of months. Nobody does that.
Question, Christian.
Sorry, and just in terms of how many other conservatives feel the same way that you do that are currently sitting in caucus?
Yeah, I would suggest that there probably are those that are in the same boat, but I will let them tell their stories if that time comes.
I'm Dr. Nick Murray from the Canadian Press. I know you just spoke of Mr. Poilievre and the direction he was going, but I'm just wondering whether the Conservative leadership style perhaps pushed you out of caucus.
Well, I think that's probably a part of it. I didn't find I was represented there. That my ideals of an Easterner, of a red Tory, I mean, quite honestly, of trying to find ways to find solutions and help your community rather than trying to oppose everything that's happening. And I think that's the opportunity that's being offered by Prime Minister Carney and the government caucus is to help find solutions at this critical time for Canada.
By the way, the media asking the question, did it have to do with Pierre Poilievre's leadership style? The reason that the mainstream media asks questions like that is because they want the soundbite. They want to be able to go on the news and they want to be able to say, it's because of Pierre Poilievre that he crossed the floor. Listen to this. Hey, listen, you don't have to like your boss. You don't have to. I got a couple of them that I do not like at all, to be honest with you. But I work for them. And they're the boss. They call the shots. In politics, the leader calls the shots. Now, you're welcome to cross the floor if you would like. But it's dishonest to do it the way Chris did it here. I think Chris should have stepped down. I think Chris should have asked for a by-election. Chris should have asked the people again to re-elect him as a Liberal. Maybe they would have. But we won't know now because he screwed over the people who sent him to Ottawa. Chris is getting a hell of a paycheck right now to be the member of Parliament for that riding. And he's getting it because conservatives sent him to Ottawa, not Liberals. But now, whatever the deal was, maybe he's making more now. I don't know.
contextualize the decision to leave with regards to what happened with your push and your bid to become the speaker. Some MPs have told me that you looked dejected the day that you had to remove your name from the floor, and of course, another one of the Conservative colleagues ended up being deputy speaker. I'm just wondering if you could speak a little bit to that, about how that impacted this decision.
I mean, I think it was an awkward time. I was hopeful, as many people would be hopeful, but I did move on. The summer came, and we had a great summer of traveling around. It wasn't really in my mind. It's just looking at leadership styles and whether we're doing the right thing for Canada or we're doing the right thing for ourselves. I would rather be on the side of Canadians.
I'd love to hear more about that. Listen, yeah, it did have to do with him not getting supported to become deputy speaker. It's about him. It's about his political ambitions. It is not about his constituents, as he tries to suggest. Let me give for you now a response, though, from the Conservative Party. This is Member of Parliament Michael Barrett. Michael's great. He's a real smart guy and possibly even a future leader someday. You never know. Michael talked about Chris crossing the floor. This is a rebuttal that I think you should hear.
Well, as I told your colleagues upstairs, all the questions should be for Mr. d'Entremont this morning. I would encourage you to look at his own words about his prime minister. We've been very consistent about what we've said our expectations were for this budget. And Mr. d'Entremont, let me just share with you his own words. He said that, quote, "We warned that the Liberals' out-of-control spending and massive deficits were irresponsible, but of course they did not listen. Now, after 6 months under a new Prime Minister who promised financial discipline, Canadians are still waiting. He said that he would be judged by the cost of the grocery store. Well, Canadians are judging him, and they're not impressed." So that's what Mr. d'Entremont had to say about Prime Minister Carney. And so here we have, as a Member of Parliament, and Mr. d'Entremont, who said one thing and is now doing another, who said one thing to his constituents, that he would fight for an affordable budget to provide affordability for Canadians, and that's certainly not what we've seen. I can tell you that, along with my Conservative colleagues, that what we've said we wanted, we were very clear with the Prime Minister, gave him the opportunity to consult and to make adjustments where needed if we truly are at this turning point. Well, I'll tell you what the turning point is. It's more Canadians turning towards food banks because they can't afford to feed themselves. You look at Deloitte's report about the food packaging tax that the Liberals have kept in place, raising the price of fresh produce by 30%. You look at the industrial carbon tax and the effect that farmers are telling us that it's having on raising prices for consumers. That's why we're seeing people struggling with this affordability crisis. So I can tell you that it's pretty rare that a budget getting dropped and before we caucus for us to be able to say how we're going to vote on it, but it's crystal clear that the Prime Minister was not interested in providing an affordable budget for Canadians, and he's looking instead to try and provoke some kind of costly election. We're looking. That's a question for Mr. d'Entremont.
From your perspective,
yeah,
but what do you think about him saying that other colleagues might join him? That he doesn't think he's the only one? Are you worried about other Conservatives crossing the floor and giving the Liberals
I'm not going to
a majority?
engage in speculation on rumors. I'm going to tell you that it is crystal clear that this is not a budget that provides affordability for Canadians, and that's what they expect, that's what they deserve, and that's how we're going to vote.
Michael Barrett setting the record straight. But did you hear the reporters? Again, red meat on the bone. Let's go and fuel this as much as we possibly can and make it seem like all these Conservatives are fleeing Pierre Poilievre. The reality is, Pierre Poilievre scares the living hell out of the Liberals. Pierre Poilievre was so effective at dismantling Justin Trudeau and his government, the Carney Liberals want nothing to do with Pierre Poilievre. They did everything they could to get rid of this guy, just like the Democrats in America did with Donald Trump. They tried to get rid of him, get him out of politics, otherwise he is a threat to us. Well, Pierre found his way back into the House, won that by-election in Alberta. He's back, but the Liberals see another opportunity to get rid of him. There's a leadership review for the Conservative Party in January. That's mandatory after they lose an election or don't form government after an election. Up for discussion and a vote is going to be the leadership of Pierre Poilievre. Right now, the mainstream media is very much trying to create an atmosphere of dissent. Like Conservatives are losing faith in Pierre. That's simply not true. That's a media narrative, and Chris d'Entremont here fed right into it. It might even have been in on it. They're trying to make it seem like Pierre has no support and he's lost control of the party. I don't see it that way at all, to be honest with you. I think the conservative response to this budget has been perfectly appropriate. The Liberals have forgotten about the middle class. They put nothing in that budget for the middle class. They said it themselves. 75% of that spending is to defend our sovereignty. From what? From who? Who's coming to take us? Our sovereignty is not at risk. However, if the books get much worse, then maybe it will be, because I'm really worried about the state of Canada and our finances. Are we going to default on our debt? And what happens if we do? What would happen if the Prime Minister raises the GST a couple of points to try and pay down some of this insane spending that he's got in this budget? Then what are we going to do? Scary stuff. I'm already out of time. I can't believe how quickly this episode flew by, but I don't want to let it end without hearing from Ontario Premier Doug Ford, who scrummed with reporters yesterday at Queen's Park. Listen to this. He's going to talk a little bit about the LCBO. He's going to talk about the Starlink contract and more.
Continue to leave it off of LCBO store shelves?
Absolutely. Because that's one of our tools we have to fight back and hold President Trump accountable as he wants to try to annihilate our province, our country, on every single sector. Those are one of the tools we have. So they'll stay off as long as the negotiations go. And once we get settled, then we'll invite him back.
I think there should be a public inquiry into Doug Ford's personal interference into the operations at the LCBO. Doug Ford is treating the LCBO like his own personal liquor store. He is completely overriding the public's right to choose what they want to drink and consume. He's running it like a monopoly, and he's doing it for a personal vendetta because he doesn't like Donald Trump and can't regulate his emotions. The guy melts down every time he hears Donald Trump, and this is the sort of stuff he does. Bans American liquor from the LCBO. Why won't he say how much LCBO inventory is American, not being sold? How much taxpayer money is invested into it, and when it expires, and what we're going to do when it expires. Doug, with his little stunt there with the Crown Royal, that was just the tip of the iceberg. We may be pouring out tens of thousands of bottles of alcohol if it goes past its expiry date. I don't think we should let that happen. Taxpayers paid to get that into the LCBO, and Doug won't let them sell it. Would Doug personally like to pay back the taxpayers for that? I get that he wants to protect Ontario, but doing this is just all the proof that anyone needs that the LCBO needs to be disbanded completely and completely privatized. Keep the government out of the liquor. It's the most lucrative industry on earth, and the government maintains a monopoly. Where are you aspiring lawyers? It would take you a day, no more than a day, a couple of hours, to draft a motion to challenge the government's liquor monopoly here in Ontario. And if you win, it's a huge win for everybody. Break up this monopoly. Stop letting one man decide what everyone else can do. He did it during COVID, and he's doing it again now. It's ridiculous.
The Starlink contract, cancelling that's one of the reasons Ontario won't hit its target for broadband. Do you think that was a mistake to tear up a contract you now can't replace?
No, I'm not going to support an individual like Elon Musk that was part of the group that wants to try to attack Canada and try to attack Ontario. I find it very ironic. He went to Queen's University, he lived here, but no, I don't regret it at all.
But people in Northern Ontario are now paying for that decision, not Elon Musk.
No, you know something? I had two choices. Either support one of Trump's closest allies and friends, and I guess no longer a friend, no longer an ally, but I'm not going to support him.
Unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. When are we going to know how many billions of dollars Doug wasted canceling that Starlink contract? Many people are wondering, why would the government be spending that much money with Starlink in the first place? Anybody can go into Costco and buy Starlink. You can get it shipped to your house overnight. What are we doing here? I'm told there's some sort of ground stations that we needed to install or something, and we backed out of the deal when Doug had his big dust up with Donald Trump because Elon Musk is friends with Donald Trump. I don't understand this insane overreach, but somebody's got to be doing the math here. Well, actually, the government's got to get proactive in disclosing the numbers. And then somebody's got to do the math on how much money has been wasted in this fight between Doug Ford and Donald Trump. How much taxpayer money are we going to let get wasted? How many tens of millions or maybe even billions of dollars to cancel that Starlink contract? We know it was at least $75 million US running the ad in America. What about the inventory of the LCBO that I just talked about? How many millions of dollars in inventory are just sitting on the shelves, not allowed to be sold, costing the taxpayers money? We didn't all sign up for this. One guy making these decisions for everybody arbitrarily and not with zero regard for how much money it costs. We need that money. Our hospitals, our schools. Families are waiting for autism funding, and he's just casually, because of his own personal vendetta, blowing millions to cancel this Starlink contract. I'm getting sick of it. I'm really getting tired of it. Is there a compelling reason that we need to waste that much taxpayer money? Or is this just Doug has got a hard-on for Donald Trump? I don't know. I'd really like answers, though. This is taxpayer money. And this is coming from the guy who swore he'd be responsible with it. Just throwing money out the door to prove a point. It's crazy to me. And not the least of which, the people in Northern Ontario still don't have internet. What did we accomplish here? Just wasted money.
Federal budget.
Well, hopefully a lot of infrastructure funding for our requirements, and obviously the Ring of Fire. We were out with the Prime Minister a week ago over at Darlington, but we're looking at large-scale nuclear as well at Wesleyville and possibly some other sites. So hopefully he'll put the money towards what we need. What we need right now is energy. I read an article about McKinsey that over the next 5 years, from 2025 to 2030, the report came out that the world's going to need $6.7 trillion to fill the capacity on the data centers around the world. I think that's an opportunity to get first out of the gate and attract businesses here that will put in the data centers. We have the climate, number one, but we have the power that no one else has, so we have to get to market as quickly as possible.
But the 401 tunnel, that was one of your asks when you wrote in that letter back in May to get some money to build that 401 tunnel. Is that still part of the discussion?
Yeah, it's always part of the discussion. We waste $56 billion a year on traffic every single year. And we need to get to market. We need to get the goods to market as quickly as possible. And we need to get people from point A to point B. Anyone that's driven on the 401, busiest highway in North America, it's jam-packed right up to midnight every single day from 6 in the morning to midnight. So we have to get people moving.
Premier Sean Fraser.
Okay, I mean, this is, this again, I don't know what we're doing here. There's Doug pointing out again, it costs $56 billion a year in lost productivity because people are sitting in traffic on the 401 across the top of Toronto. And there is a solution that probably wouldn't even cost $56 billion. It'd be close, but it wouldn't cost 56. Buy back the 407. Make it low toll until we've recouped the money, and then make it free. And then once it's free, go ahead and build your Highway 413. But we're building a highway that won't be done for years. We'll do nothing to solve the problem right now, rather than just buy back the 407, which is a right now solution for a right now problem. Doug is right. $56 billion a year in lost productivity, or $1 million, whatever it was. Let's spend the money and buy back the 407. If they say it's not for sale, the hell it is. Yes, it is. We're buying it back. We're taking it. We're annexing it. Pay them what it's worth and take it back into the public's hands. That's a solution. This whole, we're going to build a tunnel under the 401. And by the way, that was not in the federal budget. So I'm waiting for Doug to heavily criticize Prime Minister Carney. Do you think he's going to do that? No, he won't do that. They're buddies.
Fraser says he's not going to use the notwithstanding clause after that Supreme Court decision on child pornography. I know you had called for that. He says he can just introduce some other legislative measures to address that instead. Is that going to be sufficient in your view?
Well, let me explain it to the people. This is absolutely disgusting what the courts have decided. So anyone that goes out and has child pornography, there should be a mandatory sentence. The courts shot it down. This is the time to use Section 33. It's not the will of the people to sit there and say people that promote child pornography, they're okay. Well, that's disgusting. And they need to be in jail for as long as we can put them in jail. And I totally disagree. with the courts on this. And this is where you use Section 33. When the courts go offside, not speaking of the will of the people, and we need to make sure that these people that are pushing child pornography, it's disgusting, most disgusting behavior. However, they need to be in jail and they get rot in there all the rest of their life as far as I'm concerned.
The Liberals have said they're not going to use the notwithstanding clause to overrule that Supreme Court decision. They're not going to do it. Doug just explained, and he's right, how disgusting and reprehensible it is that these people are peddling child porn. The Conservatives have said, and not just the Conservatives, even the NDP Premier of Manitoba, Wab Kinew, even he said it. Use the notwithstanding clause to overrule the Supreme Court ruling and keep the mandatory minimum in place. The question was, do you agree with the Justice Minister, one of Mark Carney's ministers, his decision to not use the notwithstanding clause? He criticized the court, but he didn't criticize the Justice Minister. Take from that whatever you want. Friends, I gotta go. Have yourselves an amazing day. Tomorrow, Listener DM Fridays. I've already got a ton of messages in for tomorrow. I don't know, honestly, if I have room for many more, but I'll certainly consider it if something comes in that I can fit into the pod and that works with what we're doing tomorrow. I hope you can check out that episode, and if you haven't already, go back and listen to some of the other ones from this week. Colin DeMello, Global News, was on just the other day. We had a great chat. I'm still getting real good feedback on that one. Yesterday, a full breakdown of the federal budget. If you've heard some headlines, but you want to understand a little more about what's in it, check out that episode. And hopefully I'll see you right back here tomorrow with more Scott Fox After 9. Have a great day.